Welcome to Treeline Pursuits videocast. Today we're going to talk about our kill kit, the contents of our kill kit. We're going to talk a little bit about kill site preparation and staying clean. We're going to talk about the process of cleaning and the methods of cleaning. And then we're going to finish up talking about the pack out, taking care of both ourselves and our meat during the pack out to our trailhead, our vehicle, or wherever we're going to end up with our meat. It's August here in Montana. It's the very end of August. Season starts this coming weekend. We're going to spend a lot of days in the wild this year in September, chasing elk with first of all with our bow. Hopefully we'll be able to get it done with a bow. And we want to make sure that we're prepared. I've been on a lot of hunts with a lot of guys that are beginners. I've been with quite a few intermediate level, what I would call intermediate level elk hunters. And then I've been with some guys that, have far more experience even than me, more advanced elk hunters. And what I find is there's a lot of variance in how people approach the process of preparing and cleaning a big game animal and ultimately packing it out. So today I thought I would share some tricks, tips, and kind of the how I do it process. And hopefully, whether you're beginner or advanced, you might be able to pick up a few tips that I've incorporated from all the mistakes that I've learned the hard way over my 20 plus years of elk hunting. So first of all, let's get to the point where you've killed your animal. You've killed an elk or a big game animal, and that animal may or may not have died in the best spot possible. I have found that's the case for me, is they never seem to die in the perfect spot. Either they're out in the wide open sun, or they're in some deep crammed in some canyon crevice somewhere. But with this, I've adapted a process, I think, that helps me kind of deal with a variety of those kind of situations. Obviously, if you're with a group of hunters, there is the possibility of moving an animal, particularly difficult animals like elk. But if you're by yourself, moving a full elk is not an easy process solo, at least for very far. So sometimes you just have to be prepared to deal with it where it's at. And that's where I think some of the methods that I've seen on video kind of fall short on that. They kind of show you the perfect scenario. Animal's laying out in a nice shaded meadow, and it's just laid out right there perfectly. There's a lot of things that make that easy. But you can't always take that for granted that that's going to be the case. So you've got your animal on the ground. First thing you want to do is start thinking about your kill site preparation. So the way I approach it is I lay out all my gear first. I get all of my gear out, my kill kit. I get my kill kit out and the supplemental items to my kill kit, which I'll talk about. I make sure that I've got everything. You take inventory. If for some reason you're missing an item, how important is it? Is it going to hinder? Is it going to stop our process, or should we alter our process? That inventory is going to quickly tell you if you're ready to go or not. Number two is I get myself focused on being clean. I'm in Montana. I hunt primarily Montana, Wyoming, Colorado. I've been to New Mexico, Idaho for the first time this year. So particularly Idaho and Montana and Wyoming, most of the areas I hunt in those states, they do have grizzlies. So the precautions that I take are probably even more exaggerated in those states, but that doesn't mean you ignore black bear encounters. Black bears and meat, our food for them, can be real troublesome. So I take almost the same precautions, whether I'm in black bear territory, grizzly territory, whatever, how it mixes. But typically what I will do before I start to clean an elk, I will strip down to my underwear. I'm known for that. I will take my bear spray, and if I'm in grizzly country, my Smith & Wesson PD ultralight and just put the belt on with my underwear. I got both my spray and my gun on my belt. I wear my boots and my underwear. That's it. My main reason for doing that is I don't want any blood on any of my clothing as much as possible. Of course, you're going to get some on your boots. You just got to limit it, especially if you're going to be camping after that kill, meaning you're going to return to hunting with your group, or you're helping someone clean, or there's for some reason you're still going to be out in the wild. If the hunt is over and you're packed out and you're heading home, you might be able to, not worry about it as much. But I see a lot of guys get a lot of blood on them when they process a big game animal. They are big animals. When you start rolling those animals around, it can get very difficult. And there's almost no way to avoid it. And that's why I take that tactic. I'm not endorsing, I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying put some effort, put a lot of effort in staying clean if you're going to be continuing your hunt. You got your bear spray and or gun. You always keep it with you. If you got your pants, keep it in your pocket. You never want to be separated from that bear spray when you're at a kill site. Particularly you rifle hunters. In Wyoming last year, I got to kind of experience it firsthand. We were on early rifle in Wyoming, and there's been rumors, I've been hearing rumors of, stories of grizzlies coming to the sound of gunshots. And it just seemed that they were very, very active with those gunshots. And, it's hard to tell for sure, but I do believe there's some truth in that. I think they've been conditioned over time. They hear a gunshot associated with a carcass. It becomes a learned habit. And then you got problems on your hands. You got problem bears in the area, potentially problem bears. So taking these precautions will help you do that. Now that we've got our site prepared and we've got ourselves prepared to stay clean and we've took inventory of our gear, the next up is kind of evaluating what method we're going to use as far as the cleaning method. Now, maybe you've already decided this before you're going and you've already, you've made up your mind. And when you get to the contents, my kill kit contents, it is important that I know that in advance, and we'll talk about that when I get to the contents. But so the cleaning methods, there's basically two schools of thought. There is the traditional gutted method, like I did most of my whitetail deer over my 40 some years of whitetail hunting back in Missouri. Basically you're gutting and removing the guts, and then you're basically skinning the animal, or like outfitters do, taking the hide off with the quarters, which is great if you can, and you're going to get it out quick and you're not worried about it getting warm. There's a lot of factors with that. I don't even do that. I don't address that. I never have an option to do that, and I don't want to do that. So we're not going to even discuss that option, but it is an option that is used. So as far as cleaning methods, the gutless method is kind of the newest trend. It's not really new. It's been around a while, but it's really become more common over the past few years. Basically, you're going to quarter the animal by skinning it first with the guts in. You're going to do a process of skinning it and then removing the quarters and then deciding if you're going to pack the quarters or you're going to debone, which we'll talk about next. I really highly recommend learning the gutless method. One, I think that it's a little safer to do. What I mean by that is you're not reaching up inside. You're not running the risk of maybe a broadhead being in there or even cutting yourself with a knife. The guts, particularly on an elk, are really big. And when you start moving those around and you're cutting up in there, there is, I believe, there's a little higher risk that you could cut, nick yourself. And the smell, the mess, the blood, we mentioned with the predators, there's a lot of reasons that I don't like the gutted method anymore. So the gutless method, we're not going to get in how to do it because there's a lot of great resources, no reason to reproduce it. We might make a video this year when we harvest one. Hopefully we will harvest, but for the most part there are some great resources. Corey Jacobson has, I think, a free video on his YouTube channel, does a great job with the gutless method. He also covers it in great detail in his Elk 101 University. I can't recommend that enough, especially for beginner or intermediate elk hunters. That university is amazing. Number two, Randy Newberg has a series of videos, meat handling videos, does a great job as well. Jay Scott and Giannis Patelis have a couple part series on doing the gutless method too. If you Google search gutless method, Corey Jacobson, Randy Newberg, or Jay Scott, Giannis Patelis, you're going to come up with a series of videos, and if you watch those, you're going to feel very confident with those methods. Okay, so now we've decided we're going to do the gutless method, let's just say. Doesn't matter what method, but assuming we're going with the gutless, we will begin the process of quartering the animal. Before we do that, what I like to do is in my kill kit, which you'll see in a minute, I carry a tarp. I pull this tarp out. It's a 5x7 tarp. That's kind of one of the unique things in my kill kit that I carry that a lot of guys don't. A lot of them will carry a trash bag. They'll do different things. I don't like those. Trash bags aren't big enough. Number two, and they don't seem to stay put that well when it's blowing, and they don't seem to do a great job of helping me keep my meat clean. I like to carry that tarp. It's very light. It's 3 ounces, 4 ounces, I think the one I've got, and it's worth the wait. It's worth the weight in gold for the extra meat that I'm able to save and avoid issues with it. We'll talk about that. I spread that out. As I'm quartering that elk out, once I've completed the skinning process on one side, for example, if we're doing the gutless method, I'm quartering that animal. I'm removing those quarters, and I'm laying them on that tarp away from the animal. I know a lot of guys put their quarters down on the skin as they fold the skin over, and they put it, you'll see it in the videos. I don't do that method. I'm usually walking around, I'm stepping over, I'm straddling, I'm working on those animals. Again, I want to stay clean, and I want to keep my meat clean. So I want to remove those quarters, get them away from the elk. And then I'm going to remove all the extra meats, the necks and the rib meat and other things that you'll see in the videos. Once I've got all of my meat removed from the animal, that's when, well, I decide ahead of time, but that's when you have to decide, are you carrying that meat out in its quarter state, or are you going to debone? I'm going to go through the pros and cons of both. Personally, I would say 80% of the time, I will debone an elk, even if I've got a short pack out. And there's a lot of reasons why. Number one, when you're deboning, it's lighter. It's going to be lighter to carry. That's just simple. Elk bones particularly are really big. Now, I might carry a quarter of a deer. This video I'm primarily addressing elk, but obviously with antelope and mule deer and things like that, that changes the game a little bit. And you can evaluate it yourself. I just want to give you some things to think about. It's lighter. It goes in your pack easier, meaning it's easier to deal with the straps and get the load right and get it feeling right. With the quarter, you're working with a very fixed geometry, and that's kind of what you're working with. You're doing it anyway. You're going to take the meat. Most guys are going to take the meat off the quarter, off the bone anyway, especially if you're doing it yourself like I do. That's another reason I debone. I do all my own meat processing, so ultimately I'm going to do it anyway. Another good reason is it goes in the cooler easier. Once I get to my vehicle and I want to get that cooled down as possible, I'm really big on keeping my meat cool and doing it quickly. Getting it in the cooler is much easier when it's off the bone. It's hard to get a quarter in a cooler unless you've got some really big coolers prepared. It's easier to handle. Especially if you're solo. And it's much easier to hang, again, especially if you're solo. It is extremely difficult to hang quarters by yourself. I don't know many of you that have tried it. You think that, you throw some paracord in when you kill an elk, you're just going to pull that quarter up in the perfect tree that's 10 feet up, 4 feet out. It's just going to be in the shade all day long. I can tell you from experience that rarely happens. Rarely will you find a tree that's 10 feet, that you can get a limb 10 feet up, 4 feet out, in the shade all day, in the perfect spot, in a place you need it to be close to that elk. It's amazing when you need a tree with a limb, it's never available. The other thing about deboning is it cools out faster, much faster than when it's on the bone. I mean, you can almost feel the difference once you're deboning it, how quick that meat is starting to cool. The cons, you have to be much more careful on keeping it clean. Once you start deboning, you're subjecting yourself to getting stuff within, you're going to lose meat. The other con that people complain about sometimes with deboning is losing some meat because of the surface area that's drying out. You're creating more surface area when you're deboning versus doing the quarters. I do agree with that. But there are some things that when you're putting in the bag, you can really group it up. You can limit the outer exposure. And the new bags really go a long way in helping that. We'll talk about that a little when we get into bags. Quartering. It's quicker. Quartering's just quicker. It's a little easier to do. Deboning, you got to have some skill being able to follow the muscle lines and be able to get that, get all of that meat off the bone without wasting meat. And you got to have some efficiencies there. That's where butchering your own meat comes in handy. If you've already been used to butchering your own meat and you're already used to deboning, you're going to do really good with the deboning method. You can keep your meat cleaner, quartering. The cons, it's super hard to hang. We talked about that. It can be extremely heavy. On an average elk, somewhere between 20 to 30, even 35 pounds of that animal is going to be bone when you're carrying it out. Both, the rear legs and the front legs. Um, it's just, I don't want to carry 30 extra pounds. I'm going to have enough trouble getting it out deboned. Now, this year I'm lucky enough to have llamas. I bought llamas this year, so I have 4 amazing llamas. But even with those llamas, I want to be able to come out one trip, meaning camp and elk and me, one trip, no returns. So it's really going to force me with carrying in a 40-pound, 45-pound camp, even with 4 llamas, carrying 60 pounds or so, maybe even 70 in a worst case scenario. My llamas are a little bit young right now. I still want to debone. One, it's going to pack easier in my panniers on my llamas. And so anyway, there's a lot of reasons that I personally like the deboning method. Another con to quartering is the heavy loads. It's hard to divide it up. It's hard to kind of get it the same. So the 2 guys that draw the short straw, they get the hindquarters, are going, and obviously you can add neck meat and rib meat, and you got the horns and capes, and you can balance some of that out, but I think you get my point. There's not a uniformity to the way. You're going to have to play some games with that to get that going. So that's my analysis on choosing to do the gutless method, and I choose to do debone. But those other methods work, and I've done them all. I've tried about every tactic possible with processing big game. Next, we're going to talk about our kill kit, break down the contents of that kill kit, and talk about each item. Before we start in with the kill kit, we're going to talk about a couple of items that is not in my kill kit. I do not keep my knife in my kill kit. Talk briefly about the knife. There are a lot of options when it comes to knife, and that's all a lot of personal preference. But about 3 years ago, I switched to the replaceable blade versions of the knife. I've tried the Havalon knife, I used fixed blades, and then I tried the Havalon, and then ultimately I've kind of ended up with in this outdoor edge razor knife. The thing I like about the outdoor, it's a little heavy. It's actually significantly heavier than the Havalon. But the blade, in my opinion, is so much better. It's just as sharp, but it's much thicker, and it's got a support. You can kind of see this on the video. It's got a blade support, a blade holder that extends almost out to the tip of the blade. You can put the blade in and out very easily like that. You don't have to pop it out or any of that mess that comes with some of those replaceables. They just slide in and click, and they're done. It gives a lot of pressure for cutting and twisting when you're into like a joint. I just feel much safer with this inside a joint ball and things like that, but it's still small enough and nimble enough to do a good job caping out. I caped out a really nice bull that my friend killed last year with this pretty easily. The blades, like I said, just slide in. There's a little button. You just push it and it comes out and you replace them. I can't say enough about these replaceable blades, except for the fact you got to be extremely careful. I recently wrote an article about solo hunting, and one of the things I covered was the use of these knives. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble really fast with a knife like this. Any knife that's sharp, obviously. You never want to work with a dull knife because you're more prone to cutting yourself probably with a dull knife because you're working so much harder than you are with a sharp knife. But these sharp knives are really sharp. So if you've never used one of these, I do highly recommend them, but you got to take some very, very serious precautions to be careful with them, especially if you're going to use the gutted method. You're reaching up in there inside those guts, and that blade is out of your sight. You got to be really careful with it. But again, the Outdoor Edge razor, I really love this knife. It's relatively cheap, and I like the orange version because I can't tell you how many times I have trouble finding this thing when I put it down. It's dark. It seems to be always dark when I'm butchering out. But again, I like this knife. I keep it separate from my kill kit. I never want to be separated from my knife, so I keep it in my bino harness. It goes in it's called a basement pocket of my bino harness. I have another video out on bino harnesses. I talked about the contents of that, but this is one of those items I keep in my bino harness. Another thing that I keep in my pack is I keep the Outdoor Edge. This is called a flip and zip. It's a really ultralight saw. I like to carry a saw. I don't want the weight of a saw, so I always carry this in my pack. I rarely use this in the kill kit, and I'll tell you why. We killed that same bull I was talking about caping. We tried to skull cap with this saw, we probably could have done it, but it would have taken a half a day. I mean, honestly, it would have taken a long time. We were out in the sun. This bull was out in the wide open sun, and we wanted to get that hide. We wanted to get that hide and that meat taken care of and in the shade ASAP. But this saw just didn't quite cut it for. So for you guys that are, planning on, if you kill a bull and you're wanting to mount that, or you want to bring the antlers out, and you're not wanting to bring that head out, and you're wanting to do a skull cap, you have to think about that. Bringing an elk head out, you can do some work to the head, obviously, to lighten it up, but it's a heavy proposition, especially if you're bringing out the cape as well. So I'm not sure that I would carry this saw, but one of these saws like the Kershaw, this is a folding saw. It's a larger saw. I particularly like this Gerber saw. I have capped several deer and elk with this saw. This is about the size that it's going to take to do a really good job on a skull cap. So you'll have to decide whether or not this is worth keeping in your pack or your kill kit. I will tell you another option with this same bull that we couldn't do the cap with this razor zip. We ended up packing out the first load of the vehicle. We grabbed a bow saw, threw it on a pack, came in. We were able to cut the horns on the second trip. Never take the horns on the first trip anyway. You're focused on that meat. I know you want to take the horns the first trip, but you've got a responsibility to get that meat out first. We had the horns and the skull up in the tree, lowered it down. We capped it with the bow saw and carried it out. So there's some other ways to tackle that. This year, I'm going to be running my 4 llamas, like I mentioned. So I am going to pack this saw in my llama kit on my panniers because I'm hoping to bring any elk that I do harvest out in the first trip. So you need to weigh that out. I'm sorry I spent so much time on that, but I've ran into 3 or 4 situations where I had difficulties having to make a second trip, and I really didn't want to make a second trip because we wanted to be able to save those horns, and we really were not capable, or it was going to be really difficult to pack out the whole head. Okay, so we're going to talk about the kill kit. I keep my contents in a Caribou Magnum bag. This is a set of bags that I have that I really like. I'm not running them this year, but I do like the bags, and we'll talk about the differences here in just a second. So let's just look at the contents first. So we're going to break this bag open. First thing is we're going to break out our bags. They're just in here, stuffed in here. These bags that I'm running this year are the tag bags, the bomb bags. Before you go out and buy these bags, I think these are amazing bags, but they are boned out meat only, okay? They're tubes. They're basically a tube bag, and if you buy these bags, you're pretty much committed to doing boned out. It's going to be very difficult. Well, you're not going to be able to get a quarter in these bags. So, but I do like the texture of these bags. I like the way it keeps the meat. I love the way it keeps the insects away, and I like how quickly they dry, and it saves the meat. It doesn't get very crusty on the edge. Wet meat means spoiled meat. The drier your meat is, the better chance you have of being able to get the most meat out of it. A lot of people don't realize that. Putting your meat in a cooler with water, getting wet inside a trash bag, putting it in a creek, unless you just have to. Keep your meat as dry as possible. But anyway, boned out tag bags. They have this kit comes with 4 bags and then a smaller bag for extra meat. The one thing you might want to consider, particularly if you're solo hunting when it comes to bags, is throwing in a couple of extra bags. They're not very heavy, but when it comes to having to hang meat, and if you're solo, you're probably going to have to hang it, unless you're a much tougher man than me. If you're packing an elk out in one trip, I personally don't know anybody that can do that. And if you have more bags, it's much easier to hang, because with just 4 main bags, you're going to be hanging, you're talking roughly 50, 60 pounds of meat, boned out meat in each bag. That's going to be a very difficult task to hang. So an extra bag goes a long way to hang the meat in clusters. I mentioned, I'll talk a little bit about that more, but I mentioned before the difficulties of hanging meat. I can't stress that enough. It is extremely difficult, particularly solo. So real quickly, the Caribou bags, I really like these bags as well. They're a little more cotton feel, but they're synthetic. What I like about them is they are pretty big. This is one of the medium bags. Um, and then you've got the larger bags that, I mean, you could put a moose quarter in this thing, or you could use it as a sleeping bag liner. Um, I like these bags if you're going to quarter. If you've made the decision to quarter, these bags will work great. These bags are a little heavier than the tag bags. They both wash great. Both the sets of these bags have had multiple elk in them, and you can see they look pretty new. Um, so the caribou game bags and the tag bags I really like. I know Black Ovis has some bags. I know Kafaru has some really great bags. Kuyu has some bags. I'm not going to get into those because I have not used those, but again, a good synthetic dense weave bag is what you're looking for, whatever your preference is. Personally, I would stay away if you're going to backpack hunt, particularly, which I love to do. I like to get away from people. I would stay away from like the Alaskan game bag or like the cheesecloth type bags. They just stretch too much. They don't have the strength of those synthetic bags. They stay wet longer, and they're a lot heavier. This set of 4 bags, is heavier than my entire kill kit. So again, there's nothing wrong with them. The quality is, for what you're getting what you get. I certainly don't want to bash them. I just prefer the synthetic dense bag. These do not have the dense weave that the others have. I mean, they claim insect protection, but I just can't see it. There's just too much airspace in there for flies to be able to get in there and lay eggs, etc. So again, that's the Alaskan game bags. The tarp. This is one of the most critical pieces of my kill kit. The reason is I like I said, I debone 90% of the time. I'm a real fanatic about keeping my meat clean, and this bag, this is a cheap. I think it weighs 3 ounces, probably 4 ounces, from Walmart. $5, $6. I don't know what it costs. Not very much. It's a 5x7. So it gives you a lot of surface area to lay your meat out on and debone on and work on. And you don't feel bad about throwing this away later on. It's not expensive. Now, this one has had elk on it, and I've washed it in a washing machine, and it's back in business. So I like to reuse it. I also run a Kafaru sheep tarp, usually in my pack. There might be a time, if I'm trying to go super ultralight, that I'll use my Kafaru, but I just hate using a $100 sheep tarp, which is a super nice tarp that I use for a shelter, to put my meat on. If I'm in a pinch, I'll do it. But given the choice, I'll pack this extra 4 ounces and use this tarp. I spread this tarp out, like I said, I remove the quarters, I bring the quarters to this, and then I do the work on this tarp. It's amazing how clean your meat will stay with that. Okay, so another thing I carry in my kit is I carry a regular shop towel, cotton shop towel, and like I told you, I like to process my elk in my underwear and a belt. So I run this through my belt, and I keep it on my side, kind of spread out like this, just like that. You'll be surprised how handy this comes in when you have hair or a piece of hair on that is hard to get off your glove. You can just do it like this. Your knife, you get hair on your knife. You can easily deal with it on this. It's just, there's so many times that this comes in handy. And again, one of my prime purposes in processing an animal is keeping the meat clean and myself clean. Like I said, I'm in grizzly country a lot, so anything I can do to keep myself clean, I'm going to take it if it's reasonable and prudent. So again, I keep this at my side to keep my hands wiped off, my gloves wiped off, my blades dealt with, etc. When I'm picking hair, there's no way you're going to skin out without getting hair on something. As you're picking hair pieces off, it's hard to get rid of that hair when it's sticky to your finger. This is a great way to get it off. I've really gone to this over the past several years, and it's really been beneficial. Blades, I've got 2 sets. I've got 2 additional blades for my outdoor edge razor knife in here. They're very lightweight. Rarely will I need 2, but I just like to have them. When you're boning, depending on how good you are at it, when you're deboning, the more you hit the bone, the duller the knife gets. The gloves, inside here, I got 3 pairs of nitrile gloves in here. The main reason I carry 3 pairs is you're in a group, you need more people, more hands on deck. You've got some extra gloves. Again, they don't weigh anything. They can also, if you injure your finger or you injure your hand, these can also be used as a covering for a bandage, for lots of things. So there's actually some application for this beyond the kill kit. So again, I always throw 3 pairs in. The next thing I like to keep in my kill kit, and again, this is probably controversial because I know there's a lot of weight conscious guys out there, and I'm one of them, is I carry 2 Ziploc bags and I carry a trash bag or 2. The main reason I carry a trash bag is strictly to put the meat in when it's going in my pack for the brief pack out. That's the only time that meat is ever going to be in a trash bag. I want my meat hanging, I want it dry, and I want it moisture free. So the minute you put this in the bag, the clock starts ticking on spoiling meat. But again, I'm a clean freak, mainly because of where I hunt, so I want to keep myself clean, but you also have to keep your pack clean. You're rarely going to go anywhere that your pack's not going to go with you. If your hunt is not over, you need to, in my opinion, you need to keep that pack as clean as possible. So that's why I packed this trash bag. It's for no other reason than to put those game bags inside this trash bag. And if I need to spread it out for some reason, obviously I've got it available. The reason I carry my Ziplocs is I like to put a small portion of meat in these bags that we're going to eat at camp to celebrate. I mean, that's the whole reason, not the whole reason, but it's one of the big reasons we're out there is the chance of harvesting meat, that beautiful organic meat. So why not share up some of that meat at camp? So in my food bag, I always carry a little bit extra spice and a little bit of olive oil. And I'll put some choice cuts meats in these bags. And having a few extra Ziploc bags in your hunt, for whatever reasons, even if you've got to dip water with them, I mean, they come in handy more than you can imagine. Trash, all kinds of things. So 2 bags don't weigh much. So I will tell you, on these bags, I have over the years, I've gone with the slide top. They seem to be easier to deal with your hands, with gloves and everything else versus the pinch. And so I like the slide top versions. I rarely use this, but I have marking tape, not small, there's probably 20 foot of marking tape wrapped up in here with a little bit of black duct tape around it. Again, with the advent and the new technologies with GPSs and phones and marking waypoints, there's not a lot. I mean, I don't really have a lot of need for this. I will mark a kill site if it's a real difficult to find kill site. I will mark this with this. But when I'm tracking an animal and I'm doing a blood trail, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But I like to use toilet paper instead. There's nothing I hate worse in the elk woods is walking around and seeing a bunch of this orange tape hanging up. I mean, they say it's biodegradable and it goes away, but when? I mean, I see stuff that looks like it's been hanging for years, and I just don't like it. I don't like leaving anything out in the woods, so I always bring this out with me. So one of the reasons I don't like putting it out is I don't want to bring it back. So I keep it in there if I really need it. But again, I use toilet paper when I'm blood trailing a lot, and then I use my phone or my GPS, whatever devices. I carry both, but to mark both blood spots and to mark kill sites. The next thing in my pack is wet wipes. Again, I'm back to the clean thing again, but this, after it's all said and done, getting yourself clean and as scent-free as possible. There's no way you're going to be totally scent-free, but these little 10 count, they weigh almost nothing. They go a long way for that. And that kind of wraps up my kill kit. You notice I don't keep my knife in there. I don't keep my saw in there. And the main reason is because I may not have this kill kit. If I'm hunting with a group, 1 or 2 of us, we will pack 1 kill kit. So if I don't happen to grab my kill kit, I don't want the risk of something being in my kill kit that I need when I'm hunting. For example, my knife. And you notice there's no paracord in here. I don't keep my paracord. I might keep 1 piece or a 50-foot section in here sometimes, but most of the time I keep my paracord in my pack because I want that paracord with me whether I got my kill kit or not. That way I don't really have to think about what I need to get out of my kill kit if I'm not going to carry it that day or that morning or that week. Or we harvest 1 elk, we use that other kill kit, then I got to grab my kill kit. I want to make sure that whole process is good. So I only put the stuff in my kill kit that I actually need at the kill site. I talked about hanging meat quite a few times, but just to kind of wrap that up, when you're hanging meat, which I do prefer, you're going to want to follow the standard practices. I've had bears, there's claw marks all over the trees. If you think you're going to hang it next to the tree, honestly, in my opinion, again, this is my own personal opinion, you're better off to leave it on the ground than to hang it in a tree against the tree. And why I say that is you hang that meat up in the tree and it's against the tree, you're basically calling in the bears. They can smell it much easier in the tree than they can on the ground. So once they get to that tree, it's going to be no problem for them to climb right up there and mess with your meat. So if you cannot get it out 4 feet from the tree and you cannot get it 10 feet off the ground, in my opinion, you're better off storing it low to the ground and keeping your scent as low as possible. I do recommend if you're going to use whatever method you use, don't hang the meat, if you can, by your kill site. Because that kill site is going to attract some predators at some time. Maybe they won't come before you have to make a trip back, but maybe they will. Particularly in grizzly country, we do not want to return to the kill site. So we go to great lengths to get our meat away from the kill site and hung or down low. And again, I talked about hanging meat, hanging it in clusters, which means you're going to need a few more bags. And it also means you're going to need more paracord. If you think that you're going to throw a 25-foot piece of paracord in your pack and you're going to hang an entire elk with that, I don't think that's possible. Unless you're, unless you're a bigger man than me. So I carry at least 2 50-foot sections. That gives me usually, remember, if you're going 10 feet up, you're coming 10 feet down, that gives you 4 20, see, I can do math. It gives you 4 25-foot sections to get 4 loads up in the tree. Hopefully you're carrying out a load, so, getting 4 loads up was probably possible. If you're having to hang an entire elk and you're not able to pack it out like that night, or you're going to pack it out the next morning, then you may need more than 4 pieces. And that's where your buddy comes in. If you're hunting solo, you might want to carry more than 2 50-foot sections. Again, this is my personal recommendation. I run a cheapy little carabiner, small carabiner on the end, just makes it easier to clip on and off. It does add a little bit of weight, I realize that. And again, if I'm really going in a rough spot and I'm backpacking in the, I may cut some of these few little things out of the mix. So that kind of it covers that. Next is loading up your pack. When you load your pack, you want to make sure you get the meat up against your back. And I like to try to get it midway on my back, if you can. I know that's hard. With the new packs nowadays, with the internal straps and things, especially if you're deboning, it is much easier to get it mid to higher and up against your back. I don't like that meat hanging down and sagging low on my belt. It's a personal thing for me. So again, strapping it as tight as you can up against your back. Anything else that you got to pack out can be on the outside of that. That's where that trash bag comes in handy. It keeps your pack clean and your gear clean. But only that, again, I want to stress, the meat is only in that trash bag from the moment I hit the trail on the Packout to the moment I get to the vehicle or the cooler. And it's out. So that's kind of the way I do it. During the Packout, it's really, really important to keep yourself from getting too excited about this. You've just killed an animal. You're super excited about it. It is real tempting to take that first load at maximum weight. I've been on so many hunts where that first trip, and I've made this mistake. We've loaded those first trip so heavy that we had so much trouble even making the second trip. So use some common sense with that. If you've got, let's say you got 160 pounds of meat, don't try to do 120 and then 40. You can try it. A lot of theory people think, well, if I just get this first one done, if I just get the worst over, you still got to walk the distance, you still got to do the elevation, and you're still going to have 40 pounds on your back. I would much rather, over the years I've done this, I'd much rather take 2 80-pound loads than 120 and a 40. Now again, it's personal preference. It's just my advice. Going slow, it's really easy to kind of be pushing it, not taking breaks, not drinking, not eating, because you're trying to get to the truck. But if you got to make 2 trips particularly, you got to be really careful about wrecking yourself on that first one. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble, dehydration and nutritionally wise, on a Packout if you're making multiple trips. During the pack out, another thing I recommend is trekking poles. And again, this has only been the last 2 or 3 years of my hunting experience. I've kind of found trekking poles. Up until that point, I thought, man, if I use these trekking poles, I might as well hand my man card in at the door. I've kind of gotten over that. It makes no sense. I have trekking poles with me all the time. If I'm in difficult terrain, I use them. If I'm crossing water, I use them. And then absolutely I use them on the pack out, and I use two on the pack out. Again, I'm 50 years old. I work hard to be in pretty good shape for elk hunting. I could be in better, but ultimately at the end of the day, the balance that they give you and being able to take a break and lean forward. I see a lot of guys using them now. A lot of you probably already do, but if you're not, I can't stress enough how beneficial trekking poles are, to one, reducing the chance of injury, and two, actually just making it easier. It just makes the pack out a lot easier. I'll just be honest with you. It changed the game for me when I started using them. I want to talk briefly before I finish up here about staging meat. I know a lot of you or a lot of guys out there will stage their meat. And what I mean by that is they'll pack it a certain distance. They'll go back and get more meat and pack it to here, so that they're progressively moving towards the vehicle. And I like that approach. And I understand the idea is that they don't want to go a long way with a heavy pack, and they get breaks. They get more rest that way. I do understand that too. The problem with that is, depending on where you're at, you're giving more opportunities for predators. You're advertising your pack out basically. It's bad enough that your meat's in one spot, and there's that scent cone that's around that. I think adding to that could cause problems, but I know guys that do it. I just want to mention that. I try not to do that. And the only time I might do that is if I have a really difficult spot early in the pack out, and I want to get all my meat up to a spot or down to a spot that is very beneficial, to not have to return on a dangerous area or something like that. Absolutely, I might make it while I'm fresh. But otherwise, I would rather see myself, and I'd rather advise people to take whatever they got, divide it, and try to take equal loads to spread out the fatigue. And again, really stressing not to kill yourself on the first trip. That was probably a lot. We tried to cover a lot there. Please leave me any comments and questions. I try my best to answer them. If you got any suggestions for guys, leave those too. I'm certainly not an expert. I've been doing this for a while. I've learned from a lot of my mistakes. I'm really looking forward to season this year. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can follow us in all of our llama antics in our season on our Instagram page, and it's just Treeline Pursuits. And we'll see you out there, and thanks for watching. Have a great season.